Hi everybody, my name is Alisha. Welcome to part 4 of the sentence structure series. This series covers the 4 sentence structures of English and will help you improve your writing. You'll learn how to connect your ideas, correctly punctuate your sentences, and write long sentences that your reader will be able to understand. In this video, I'm going to talk about one of the 4 sentence structures of English, the compound complex sentence. Let's get started. First, let's define the expression compound complex sentence. A compound complex sentence is a sentence made from 2 or more independent clauses and at least one dependent clause. As you may recall from parts 1, 2, and 3 of this series, an independent clause is a clause that can stand on its own. It needs no other information. A dependent clause is a clause that depends on other information. It cannot stand alone. As you can probably imagine, compound complex sentences can get pretty long. There are lots and lots of different forms they can take because there are so many ways to put clauses together. Let's take a look at some examples. After a very successful product launch, the company CEO gave a congratulatory speech and our team went out for a celebratory dinner. I was really stressed out this week because I didn't have time to take care of all my tasks, but a few of my coworkers stepped in to help me out and they really made a difference. My phone, which I've had since 2019, is an iPhone 11 Pro. The screen protector has a few cracks in it and the battery is draining faster than it used to, but it's still got a couple years of use in it. Let's break these example sentences down into clauses so we can see what's going on. Let's look at the first example sentence. After a very successful product launch is a dependent clause. We know this because after is a subordinating conjunction. Another way to feel this is that the clause at the beginning provides us with some introductory information. Also, it's an incomplete idea. This is followed by 2 independent clauses. The company CEO gave a congratulatory speech, and our team went out for a celebratory dinner. These are joined with the coordinating conjunction and. Great! Let's break down our second example. Our first independent clause is, I was really stressed out this week. This leads to our dependent clause, because I didn't have time to take care of all my tasks. Next is an independent clause, which we connect to the previous dependent clause with but. A few of my coworkers stepped in to help me out. And finally, our last independent clause is, they really made a difference. Again, we have a coordinating conjunction here to connect these independent clauses together. Okay, let's look at the last one. This sentence begins with a relative clause dropped into the middle of an independent clause. The relative clause is, which I've had since 2019. The independent clause is around the relative clause. It's, my phone is an iPhone 11 Pro. Unlike the previous example sentences, this independent clause is connected to the next independent clause with a semicolon.
Next, we have an independent clause and a dependent clause together. The independent clause is, the battery is draining faster. And the dependent clause is, than it used to. Finally, we have one more independent clause. It's still got a couple years of use in it.
These are all connected with coordinating conjunctions. As you can see just from these examples, compound complex sentences can communicate a lot of information in just one sentence. With multiple clauses and connecting words, there's a lot going on, and your sentences can get really, really long. This is why proper punctuation is essential to helping your reader make sense of everything. Let's take a moment in this episode to review some key punctuation rules. In part 1 of this series, I talked about how we use commas before coordinating conjunctions when they're used to connect independent clauses. The same is true here. If you're connecting 2 independent clauses with a coordinating conjunction in a compound complex sentence, make sure you use a comma before the coordinating conjunction. If you have a dependent clause at the beginning of the sentence that gives some kind of introductory information, a lot of style guides suggest that you follow it with a comma. I prefer to do this myself, as it kind of feels like you're indicating a little bonus information with this comma. If you have a dependent clause in the middle of your sentence, after an independent clause, and it's followed by another independent clause, as we see in example 2, use a comma before the coordinating conjunction connecting to the next independent clause. Let's take a look at how this works in our example sentences. You can see the commas that come before coordinating conjunctions here. These are connecting independent clauses. We also see a comma after an introductory clause in sentence 1. And in sentence 3, our relative clause is set off with commas. I won't talk in detail about it in this video, but the general rule for relative clauses is that if the relative clause is non-restrictive, which means the information is not essential to understanding the sentence, then you should set off the clause with commas. I'll talk about this more in another video. The last bit of punctuation is the semicolon we see in example sentence 3. In episode 2 of this series, I talked about how we can use semicolons to connect independent clauses. The same thing is true in compound complex sentences. As you can see, proper punctuation really organizes the information and helps the reader make sense of everything. This is really important if you need to write long sentences with lots of details. A question you might be wondering then is, how long is too long? Compound complex sentences can be really long and contain a lot of ideas. How do you know when to stop your sentence? There's no rule for this, but a general guideline is to think about your reader first. The most important thing is for your reader to be able to read and understand the information smoothly, right? So your writing should help them to do that. Keep your sentences focused on one idea. If you need to include multiple clauses, make sure those clauses support your main idea or contribute to it in some way. Don't try to mash a bunch of different concepts into the same sentence. Your writing will be confusing and messy, and your reader won't know what you're trying to say. Focus on communicating one thing at a time. This leads naturally into a question about sentence structures in general. This series has covered the 4 sentence structures of English, so how do you know which one to use? There's no formula for this. This is where your own skill and your own style come into play. It's up to you to find a rhythm to your writing, a way of communicating that feels pleasing to you while also getting across the information you want to express. Generally, this means using a mix of styles. Sometimes you want to make a short, quick point. Simple sentences are great for that. Sometimes you want to compare 2 things. Maybe a compound sentence is good for this. Perhaps you're writing an academic paper and you need to share some background information about your research. Maybe you start with a simple sentence, then a compound sentence, and then a compound complex sentence. Who knows? The reality of writing is that most writers don't sit down at their desks and say, okay, I'm going to write a compound sentence next. They express themselves in a manner that feels natural to them and get the words out. Then usually they edit the words until they like the vocabulary chosen, the rhythm, and the length of the sentence. When you're writing, don't expect your sentences to come out perfectly right away. It's totally natural to write, rewrite again, walk away, and rewrite some more. Knowing the structures of English sentences can be helpful as you work on improving your writing because it can help you break down patterns in your own writing and consider different ways of presenting your material. Here's a tip if you're not sure how you want to write. Take a look at a book or an article by an author you enjoy. Try breaking down their sentences. Do they use a few simple sentences followed by a complex sentence, then more simple sentences? Do they use lots of long, compound, complex sentences? Try analyzing a few pages of your favorite author and see if you can find something about their writing style that appeals to you, beyond the story. Then you can try to replicate that in your own writing. Maybe your favorite author writes in a short, clipped, abrupt manner with lots of stops for emphasis. Or maybe you prefer writing that is long, flowy, and full of description. Again, there's no right answer. It's up to you to read, explore, and start trying things. Great! In this video, we talked about compound complex sentences, and we've also come to the end of the sentence structure series. Let's recap what we talked about in this video. First, we learned that a compound complex sentence is a sentence made from 2 or more independent clauses and at least 1 dependent clause. Second, just like we talked about in earlier episodes of this series, we punctuated independent clauses connected with a coordinating conjunction with a comma. We talked about setting off non-essential or non-restrictive relative clauses with commas. Also, we reviewed a use of semicolons. We can use them to connect independent clauses. Third, we talked about a tip for sentence length with these types of sentences. While there's no rule for this, a good guide to use is to focus on one idea at a time in each sentence. If your sentence needs to be long, all of the information in the sentence should relate to one idea. Finally, as this is the last video in the series, we talked about the importance of reading authors you enjoy and taking a look at their work to help you define your own writing style. Remember, writing and editing are 2 separate processes. It's likely you won't write something exactly perfectly the first time, and that's okay. It's natural to need to do a lot of rewriting, even on something as simple as a work email. Awesome! You now know all about the 4 sentence structures of English. You can find some more details about related topics in other videos on the English Writing Tips channel. I hope you enjoyed this video and this series and you learned some new things. If you want to leave a question or comment, or if you want to practice writing some compound complex sentences or practice paragraphs, feel free to do so in the comments. Of course, if this video and this series helped you, you can help me by hitting the like button and sharing this video with your friends. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more writing, punctuation, spelling tips, and more. I'll see you next time. Bye! We reached the end! Wow, there's just 4 sentences, but there's so much to say. Yay! We did it! We learned all 4 of them. Hooray! That was fun. Good job. Good job, everybody.